Two Wood for a Wheat is a board game podcast. We review and criticize board games, diving deep into the strategies and mechanisms that make them great or make them forgettable. Hey, welcome to Two Wood for a Wheat. My name's Pat Flannery.
And I'm Tony Faber.
Today we will be discussing the new hotness, it's Revive, a game about rediscovering the planet 5,000 years into the future, coming out of our hovels and racing to find the most fantastic and resource plenty portions of this vibrant new world. We'll also be discussing reset turns, where we take a pause, reset our resources, reset our actions, and come back into the game even stronger than before.
Is it really 5,000 years, Pat?
Yeah, it's 5,000
in the
years.
Future? I have not read the blurb on the box, apparently.
You clearly haven't done the campaign either.
Yes, apparently not.
I plan on living that long, so I can report back on the veracity of how this game details 5,000 years in the future.
Excellent.
That's exciting. I'm excited for that. Well, Tony, how is it going with you? How is it going without the B-sides at this point?
I can take a breath, play a game, think about board games, chat on the Discord, play some stuff on BGA, and not be worried every second that I've got to be getting 2 more plays in today or we're not going to be able to review this game.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a relief, if I'm being completely honest.
Good. I'm happy for you. If anybody didn't know, we actually stopped the B-side points of the episode, so we're all A-side at this point. B-side is effectively taking a hiatus. We will have B-side episodes here and there dotted through, but for Tony's good health and the sake of the pod, we will be sticking to the A-side primarily from now on.
Yep. I know some people missed it because I looked at the how many people were listening, and I noticed a spike of listeners on the Monday morning that would have been a B-side episode. I felt kind of bad about that, but that meant they didn't actually listen to the previous B-side episode, so not the most keen listeners.
I left a note.
You should have had like 10 seconds of intro with Mitch and I about to launch into an episode, and then you come on and say, April Fool, there's no episode anymore.
Oh my gosh, that would have been so cruel. I did consider rolling the full intro music just to tease people and give them hope, but I'm not that cruel of a guy. Have you spoken to Mitch since or gotten into the Frosthaven?
I have. In fact, Mitch is just extremely busy with work. In fact, Mitch really wanted to play Revive, and one reason I only have basically played this game solo is because Mitch and I couldn't get it to the table multiplayer because he was too busy with work and craziness to get out there. But I know he's dying to play Revive, so when I have more thoughts about it in the future in the multiplayer version, I will probably have played it with Mitch.
Well, excited for that.
How you been, Pat?
I'm good. How have you been?
Pretty good. Otherwise, I'm excited. Later this afternoon, I'm going to the first game of the Somerset Patriots, which is the Yankees AA team. And I hate the Yankees, but they're playing the Mets AA team, which is the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. We could do a whole episode.
You're just making up words at this point.
The origin of that name. But anyway, the Patriot Stadium is only 2 miles from where I live. So
it sounds like you have to be a fan.
Yeah, so AA baseball, I mean, there's nothing as fun as going to a minor league baseball game. So
yeah, they don't even get mad when you throw hot dogs at them.
I don't think that's actually true, but...
And then they're allowed to punch the fans in the stand without getting fined. So it's very exciting for both sides.
That's not correct. Anyway, I'll report back on the Somerset Binghamton AA baseball game.
Good.
Next episode.
Okay.
Well, let's jump right into board games and what board games we've played.
What have you been
playing? Last couple of weeks. Mostly the board game arena stuff I usually talk about, the Applejack, the It's a Wonderful World. But I did get back into playing a couple games of A Feast for Odin and was reminded what a wonderful game it was and what varied options you have and all the tricky tactical choices you have from turn 1 all the way to the last turn of the game. I am a little sad that the Norwegians expansion is not on Board Game Arena, and I hope it arrives at some point, because without it, the animal path is a little bit sad. Without it, there's not as many exploration paths, and they don't have those nice one-space worker placement spots that you end your turn with.
Yeah, you may as well play against yourself without the Norwegians expansion. All the tension from those one placement spots is gone.
I mean, there's still a lot of tension in the worker placement spots, and yeah, it's still a very good game, and it made me think that when we do some of our retro reviews over the summer and fall, of which we're probably going to do a couple, that it may be right for a retro review.
A re-review?
Oh, yeah, we reviewed it already. Old. I am old. The brain is old.
The brain needs coffee. The brain needs a major Dickinson in order to get that flow moving.
This is what happens when you get me on without, full coffee, full wake-up time. I'll suggest reviewing a game we've already. Did we review the Norwegians with that? I know we've
Yes,
talked about
and our
what.
topic was explicitly expansions.
Oh yes, yes. This is where I got into trouble saying that the Norwegians was like pretty much the only good expansion out there.
And then he reviewed Underwater Cities New Discoveries only a couple of months later and had to
Well,
fess up.
that was fine, but it was no Norwegians.
Well, nothing is.
Yeah. Okay, so we won't review a game we've already reviewed before. But that was 5 years. That was at the very beginning. That was like one of our first episodes.
Yeah,
well,
I think
not
that was
our first
episode 20. It was definitely within the first year.
What have you been playing this week?
Your friend Kevin came into town. Kevin used to go to the Monday game nights in Pilsen back in like 2018 and earlier, around when I showed up on the scene. And he brought a lot of games. Kevin is a larger-than-life figure that likes to table talk and likes to skew things in his favor when he's teaching and playing a game. Not to say that he was cheating or anything. He just does a lot of table talk. So a lot of the game is played verbally, which I discovered when we played Tyrants of the Underdark. Before there was Dune Imperium, and before there was Great Western Trail, there was Tyrants of the Underdark. And I was starting to think that I didn't like deck building games, but it turns out that I do when they're paired to an area control mechanism, like in Tyrants of the Underdark. And man, this game, it's really good. It's really fantastically fun. And there was so much table talk with Kevin. There's multiple strategies to this game. Basically, you're fighting over this giant map of areas with points in them and then key control points that will generate end of round bonus points as well as give you extra buying power from the card market, right? There's multiple strategies in this game because there's the on-the-table area control versus the off-the-table promotions. Cards, when you get them out of your deck, are actually worth more when you promote them, and you also have a slimmer deck. And then there's slim deck to repeat a bunch of abilities versus a fat deck to pack points and power, albeit less consistently. Then there's the early game points for capturing neutral units versus mid-game points for holding point-generating locations versus end-game points by promoting cards and final area control. And then there's this, brute dominance area control or these specialized presence using spies to take points away from players or sneak in behind them. Kevin decided to do this really efficient strategy of calling his deck and putting a bunch of things in his promotion pile versus I went out for this big, burly, brawly strategy of getting a bunch of early game points and controlling all of these areas. And I had a great turn 0 setup where I was able to control 2 choke points, nexus points that gave me extra buying power and in-game points. And he was able to say, hey, look at this guy. He's got so much presence on the map. Look at him. Everybody should probably attack him and, put his spies out. And I was like, no. Check out his deck. I know this trick. His deck is extra fat. And he's got a bunch of cards in the promotion pile. Don't be fooled. He's got like 10 cards there and all of these points. Don't be fooled. So we successfully negated each other and people just decided to attack both of us and cancel out both their points, which was effective. But I came out with the victory on top with out promoting a single card and just burling my way through. It was a lot of fun, this game of Tyrants of the Underdark. And I've only played with the Goblins and Dragons deck, or the Draugr and Dragons deck.
The Drow.
Yeah, I would love to play some more of this game with the other decks.
Yes, I recommend the Demons deck, which is even meaner.
What does it do?
The Demons deck has something where it has the Devour mechanism. It's not promote a card, but actually destroy a card to do certain things. And so you'll have a powerful demon, and you have to destroy one of your own cards to activate it, which in the early game is really good because you just get rid of those weaker cards to thin your deck. But in the later game, when every card is good, that starts to be more of a sacrifice.
And then when you're destroying more cards from your deck, the more the demon comes up, which means the more cards from your deck you destroy. Yikes.
Exactly.
That sounds fun. Love to play it again.
Yeah, and I'm glad you got to play with Kevin, who really brings that sort of East Coast energy. Spoiler, he's originally from the East Coast, as you can probably...
that makes sense. He said that he lived in Madison, and something just didn't ring out as friendly Midwestern to me.
No, he's originally from Florida. In fact, he's the one who sort of turned me on to playing the Florida Man game, which is where you Google your birthday, put in like, my birthday is June 16th, and you put in June 16th Florida Man into Google, and you get your spirit Florida Man. I think mine attacked sheriff's deputies by throwing a samurai sword at them.
Mine, I believe, was wrestling an alligator for control of a out of control car.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he still keeps that East Coast edge, which we find so enjoyable.
He also taught us a game called Goblin Vaults. This is by Keith Matejka, the designer of Role Player, and Eric Schlotman. I guess they're both Wisconsin guys, so he knows them personally. But this game is interesting. It's like you put Calico into a trick-taking game. So on your turn, you're betting on one of 4 cards in a card market. And you will win a card if you have the highest number card bet on it, or for having the current round's trump suit in the highest card if there's multiple trump cards. You can also spend a resource to purposefully underbid to lose and take back the card that you bet with. And when you win a card, this is the interesting part, it will be placed in the backmost available space of a 4 across by 3 deep grid. And you're building out a 12 card grid as you go. Now, what that allows for are these multiple scoring mechanisms, because cards will have a preferred placement and will individually score for being in the back, middle, or front of a column, but they'll also score for matching your color suit. Each player will have an individual color suit. And then there are also 3 common goals suggesting how you should put your cards out. Like, every skull card will score 3 points if they are the lowest card in the row, or a crown suit card will score for being the highest card in the column. And this all creates this pretty nice tension of how much a card is worth to you, right? When you're actually betting on it. If it's matching your suit, satisfies a scoring condition, and will match a current available slot on your grid, you're probably going to bid high and may even burn a trump card on it. But then there's this cool underbid mechanism that I mentioned, which is very clever since the cards in your hand, they might actually be worth more to you than what's in your tableau. But in order to make that happen, you not only have to spend a resource, you also have to make sure to underbid someone else. So you have to make sure that you are not the first player in the round, that the other cards are not worth more to you, that are already in the card market, and you have to bide your time in order to make this happen, and you might actually delay play of that card. If a good card slot is not open to you, you might decide, okay, I'm going to underbid the next round, right? But you don't know what's coming the next round, so it might not be worth it to you at that point either, right? And the dealer rotates, and there's a good bit of forward thinking as you can actually change the trump suit at the end of your turn as a dealer, probably to match the cards in your hand. Now, this game, it's interesting. It doesn't go without its issues, though. You don't get to complete your grid, which frustrated me because I'm like completing things in my game. You only get to lay out 10 cards and not the 12. And that is not only dissatisfying, it can also limit the number of times that it can achieve a certain scoring condition. Like if you have a row-based scoring condition as well as a column-based scoring condition, you might be able to maximize only one of them, right? Completing either 3 entire rows or 4 entire columns. You can't do both. And then your starting hand is your only hand for the game. Like there's a few opportunities when you're the dealer where you can switch out a card with a random card drawn from the deck, but that's very occasionally. So if you start with several low cards from only 2 suits, you're probably going to have to rely entirely on them being or becoming trump cards to win any tricks. The last thing is, Tony, I don't really like trick-taking games. Like there's so much randomness in the cards that come out into your hand, juxtaposed to the randomness of the cards that come out into the card market, juxtaposed to the actions of the other players, that I just feel like I have very little control. And it's not that I'm bad at them either. Like I scored higher than the average score and was only second to the winner. However, if you do like trick-taking games and have liked Calico or have really enjoyed competing scoring tensions, this game has a lot of competing scoring tensions for you, and Goblin Vaults may be the game for you.
Not liking trick-taking games. You make me sad, Pat. Very, very sad. I like trick-taking games that move fast because I don't want to rack my brain too hard on every decision because of the randomness, like you said. It actually sounds interesting. I didn't just kind of, check my phone while you were spending a lot of time talking about a game. I actually, Goblin Vault sounds like something I might try.
I didn't grow up playing trick-taking games in my family. That wasn't really for us. We played like Stratego and chess. Card games were not really for us, so wasn't my kind of thing. But in other households, I know that it was everything that people played. So for those folks like you, might be for you.
Cool. Well, let's dive right into our feature game, which I think we're both pretty excited to cover because this was one of our most anticipated games from last year that has recently come out, and we're finally gotten it enough to the table to review, and that is Revive.
Let's do it.
Revive, which is designed by a whole series of Scandinavian designers, 2 of which, Elif Svensson and Christian Amundsen Osteby, we have talked about before for their games such as The Magnificent, Santa Maria, Trails of Tucana, one of my favorite roll and write games, Automania. They've done a whole bunch of well-received Euro games, and they have 2 other co-designers joining them in this one, which are Helgi Meissner and Anna Vermlund. Pronunciations are probably way off, disclaimer. Publishing in their usual publisher, Aporta Games. This is a chunky Euro game that's has a post-apocalyptic theme to it about repopulating the world, but its mechanisms, I almost hesitate because they're a bit tricky to describe.
Shall I give it a shot, a rough overview here?
Go for it.
In summary, in Revive, 5,000 years in the future, you're reclaiming the land from ice. And the main things that you'll be doing are exploring the land, rediscovering it by spending resources, journeying far across it, spending provisions in order to journey, settling settlements in locations that are left, old burned out cities, and creating outposts out on the world in order to discover machines and build out your machines, of which are represented by 3 different colored machine tracks, which you will climb and be able to activate using electricity and power. And generally, your resources are created by 4 different card slots, which you will play into across 3 different colors. These card slots can be upgraded using card slot upgrade modules to give you more resources or more abilities as you match the color that's associated with them. And as you unlock these machines and climb these machine tracks, you will rack up this research scoring ability. As you get to the end of the Earth, you will be able to put out researchers who will get you endgame points, and you'll get endgame points for the top of these machine tracks, as well as for getting your researchers out, as well as in-game points.
There's points for a lot of things in this game.
Yes, there really are. There's also points for discovering artifacts. Artifacts are represented by what look like alien skulls, I would say, purple, orange, and white alien skulls. And these are associated with endgame goals that are handed out to each player at the beginning of the game. And you will be able to score these points repeatedly for each alien skull to the extent that it is X+1, where X is the number of associated alien skulls of orange or purple or white associated with that explicit scoring ability. Ostensibly, what you're doing is you're racing across this frozen Earth, rediscovering it, repopulating it, putting out outposts, rushing to the ends of these areas, playing out cards to build combinations and generate as many resources as possible and as efficiently as possible. And if you ever run out of resources or card slots, you can hibernate, which will reset your board, free up your card slots, and free up your machines to be utilized again. And you can start all over.
This game has a lot going on. You could say at its core, it's a deck building game as you play these cards out and you will get more cards, and your hibernate turns sort of like resetting your card deck there, and playing your cards gets you the resources and sometimes does some other things. And then you're trying to do these 3 main things that Pat described, which is to explore tiles, which gives you points and more cards when you flip them over, to put down new population out there, which unlocks ability and is worth points at the end of the game, and then to build buildings, which moves you up these tech tracks that Pat talked about. So you're basically playing cards to get resources and then doing those 3 things to get across the board. And you get points for all of it.
Yeah, somebody described this as a Stefan Feld with a cool theme, more tracks, and a race element.
Yes, I did notice a Stefan Feld vibe, and not the least of which was the theme. While it's cool, this feels, I'm going to say, and I don't mean this badly, it just feels like you get wrapped up and entwined in the mechanisms of the game more than you do the theme of the game.
Yes.
You're not sitting there going, oh, I'm really feeling this post-apocalyptic exploration. You're more like, no, I need one more food to flip that tile over there so I can get closer to my goal of putting a person in that point-scoring corner.
Mm-hmm. And what you may not realize on your first play, and I think we can start the discussion somewhere along here, is that this is very much a race game. In order to flip a tile, you have to be the first one there in order to get the points. The first person to place onto a tile will get to place there for free, but everybody else will have to pay resources. And the skulls that are the point multipliers, which are integral to the game, they are limited, and they go to the person who gets them first. And they are also the end game trigger. So at the end of the day, this is very much an efficiency puzzle and a race game.
Yeah, and it should be worth mentioning at this point a little distinction between the solo and multiplayer versions of this game, because the solo game, you have limited time, but it's not a race game and beating other players to something. So it feels quite different. And full disclosure, I've only played this game solo. I played it a bunch solo, but all my multiplayer attempts to play this game have fallen through, unfortunately. So I hope to revisit in my comments about this game after you're playing it multiplayer. While you're doing all the same actions, it has a different feel to it, and you're trying to sort of make a long-term plan, and you don't have to worry about beating somebody to a different space.
Yeah, the solo game is a beat your own score efficiency puzzle where you're trying to maximize what you can do without playing cards, which is interesting that you only played it that way because it is significantly different from the multiplayer game.
I think either way, there are some interesting timing considerations about how many actions you take before you do that reset, and a lot of it depends on how much of key card slots you've used up, or on how much of your energy to do those special actions you've unlocked on those technology tracks you've used up that you get back when you hibernate. Sometimes you just want to do every action you can before you hibernate. Other times you might want to rush the hibernation a little. When you hibernate, you also get a bonus that you might want. And the timing, again, the end of the game is just after 20 actions in the solo game, but it's triggered by how many of those artifacts people get in the multiplayer game. So again, that has more of a race feel. In the multiplayer game, I imagine the game, as Pat described previously in his initial plays of this game, the ending can just come all of a sudden as people unlock the artifacts on their technology.
So let's start there with the multiplayer game. This is a hard first play for people because, the bones of the game are pretty simple. The bones are just, you're going to climb tracks, you're going to generate resources, you're going to get to the good sites first, and you're going to go to the good sites. And there's a lot of okay, well, here's what's in front of me. So I'm going to do that because it's in front of me and it's cheap. And I'm not necessarily going to go after the hard thing that's far away. So I'm just going to do the thing that's cheapest and maybe not the best, but that's what I get. That's what I've got in front of me. So there's not necessarily that rush of I need to be efficient because people don't necessarily have the awareness of this race element. The end game is maybe 10% of gameplay, and it triggers when all skulls are taken, and that happens within 1 or 2 rounds where there will be all the skulls and then there will be no skulls. And at that moment, the game becomes this desperate gambit to complete any, even just one endgame bonus. When a round ago, you were considering 4 of them. It's a bit jarring to new players since the other 90% of the game feels so loose and promising. You've got all these things in front of you. Which of the 4 corners do I want to go to? Oh, what card do I want to play next? Should I take a hibernation action to, oh my God, I have 2 actions left and just a couple of machines that are available to me. How in the hell am I going to finish my machine track as well as get to this corner spot in order to get me any points?
Yes, and I love how there's some rule-breaking technologies there which may help you in this endeavor. For instance, you may have something, usually you have to connect off of what you've previously built and pay food to extend your range to put the next thing out, so you're sort of chaining buildings and population in a line. But maybe you have a technology which allows you to skip over or alleviate some of those costs, so you can play way across the board all of a sudden. I can imagine in the multiplayer game it allows for some unpredictability where you, Pat, unlock and explore a new area, which you're then going to build in, and then somebody suddenly leapfrogs in front of you to build a building in the perfect spot in the tile you've just uncovered.
Yes, there's some game-breaky elements there, not least of which is what you just described, but there's also elements that are specific to some of the races that are in the game. Like one will generate a resource for every new card that you grab. Whenever you flip a tile over that you've explored, you grab a new card. And one of the races actually will generate resources for that card, the Kuni bar, and they are amazing. Suffice to say, the bones of the game, they're really simple, almost to the point of being kind of dry. But for me, what elevates this game is 1, that race element, but 2, what we're talking about right now, which are those machines and those combinations. This game, Revive, is all about combo chaining. There's cards that you can play that will play other cards for free. Very smartly, the designer said, at any point in your turn, you can interrupt your action by playing a machine. Which means mid-action, if I don't have a resource, I'll play the machine that generates me a resource. Or mid-action, right after I play a card, you know what? I'm going to activate the machine that wipes that card out and activates the top of that card, allows me to play another card in the process, and I just played that card. And so in essence, I get to play 2 new cards, and if I already had slot modules there, I activated the slot modules once, and then by putting a new card there, I'm going to activate them again and double up on my resources on top of playing the 2 new cards. So I've played 3 cards and activated 1 slot module twice. How good is that? How efficient is that?
I agree with what I think you're saying, Pat, which is that the resource conversion combined with the combo chaining can be very satisfying in this game. Very mind-melting, brain-crunchy, satisfying when you really pull some things off beyond what you would think just looking at the bones of the mechanisms.
Yeah, you don't necessarily get that. And then, like I said, the Kuni bar, take what I just said about having an upgraded slot and playing the cards in. Well, imagine that I'm also using it to take explore actions. And then I'm exploring a lot, and I'm getting this like limitless supply of cards from the exploration, right? And then those cards are also generating resources for me, right? And then I'm using those resources to explore more, which are getting me more cards and getting me more resources. And then maybe I have a machine that can remove a card from a slot module and replay the top. And then I have another machine that can reset that first machine, and then I can use that first machine again, right? And it just goes wild. It just goes absolutely bananas. And you'll have turns here where I've played multiplayer and, I'm doing 6 different things and people are just like, maybe I should grab a coffee or something because you're just taking so many turns and people are like, yeah, it seems like he's doing a lot of stuff and I can't really keep track of it, but I trust that he's, being true to whatever he's doing.
From a rules perspective, again, the basic core of the rules are pretty simple and easy to grasp. The iconography can be a bit of a bear at first when your first few games learning the game, because there's like 50 different icons that can be on those machine tokens that you're slotting in.
Right.
And sometimes when you're first playing, you're like, okay, I got to choose between all these different tokens. Let me look up what all of them do, kind of thing. Once you get the hang of it, that's not a big issue, but it can lead to a slow first play or two, I think.
Yeah, you do have to get a sense of it because some of the machines will remove a card and not play bonuses with it, while other machines will remove a card and play the bonus, right? And there's all these like tricky little things. And then there's even a campaign element that adds new ideas to the game, which just a quick aside on the campaign. I don't know if you played the campaign at all.
Disclaimer, I did not play the campaign because I wanted to concentrate all my plays on the core game. And
let me spoil it for you. It's 6 cards. They add no story. They don't resolve anything. It just gives a little bit of flavor text to a couple of the races. Just play the game right out. Pop everything out. As somebody who's played Maracaibo and had these kind of card-based campaign games or played Pandemic Season 1, Pandemic Legacy Season 1, this adds next to nothing. So just pop open this Red Bits.
So it doesn't hurt you. It's just not really adding that much story.
Not adding anything.
It's just adding a little bit of variety to your choices of asymmetric powers.
Yeah.
By the way, maybe I should wait until a little later before I say this. Regarding the asymmetric powers and regarding the game as a whole, I'm kind of going to jump to my major criticism of this game is it doesn't really feel balanced.
Turn 0 synergies?
Yeah, well, I hesitate to say that because, having played the game only, 4 or 5 times, I don't want to be like, I know better than the designers about the balance of this game. But when you talk about turn 0 synergies, how the cards that come out and the things that flip over can interact with some races much better than others. And even so much, some races seem much easier to leverage out of the gate than others. And I found myself sometimes picking the same power choices that I would unlock from laying people down for particular races and picking the same machine tokens to use, because some of which are very obvious and easy to leverage over and over again. And I don't know whether this is just my bias after several plays or whether that's actually the case. But I just noticed, I tried all the different races out and some I had a much easier time scoring a ton of points with than others.
As somebody who's played one race with not very good machines that basically didn't do any of the cool things like resetting other machines, and as somebody who's played endgame corner tiles that don't synergize with the number of cards that you draw, and juxtapose that 80-point game to the 357-point game that I had with full card synergies and the Kuni bar, which get resources for cards, and multiple mechanisms by which to reactivate card slots and remove cards from those card slots. There's a big difference. and there are turn 0 synergies, not just with the corners and the races, but also with the skull card that you get at the beginning. The skull card, this is the bulk of your points. It says score these 3 potentialities for scoring, and you will score them up to probably like 3 times, maybe 4 times.
It's not just the racial options. The corner scoring pieces also do not seem to be of equal value to me.
Yeah.
For instance, the one that gives you 2 points per card that you've acquired during the game just seems head and shoulders more valuable than any of the others. And if that one appears in your game and 4 of 10 possible scoring options end up in the 4 corners of the board, it seems, unless you're just messing around and if you're really trying to get the best score, it's just mandatory to go for that one.
On average, they give you between 12 and 15 points. I think with, at least in the solo game, I've scored 50 off of that one corner scoring spot with 2 points per card, and I got all 25 possible cards, right? And, a skull card, with points for getting cards, plus a corner space with 2 points for getting cards, plus a corner space for track progress in one of the colors, plus completing that track, plus the end game scoring for completing that track, 4 colors of that card, plus the Kuning bar card garnering ability, and holy crap, you are going to get a lot of points.
Yeah, and speaking of getting a lot of points, I should say about the solo game, which again, I've played a bunch. The solo game, how they give, they give that little graph which says if you score this points, you fail. If you score this points, it's a modest victory.
Yeah, it's like 90 to 180 points. Yeah.
Utopia if you exceed 180
Right.
points. It's really easy to do really well on that score thing, which is a little bit sad to me.
Yeah.
Like scoring Utopia, 180 or above is not particularly hard. And you can sort of just adjust those numbers in your mind if you want, but I feel a little bit sad, like, gives me the psychological feeling of like the solo game is really easy.
It's too easy. Every time I've played it, I've gotten all 6 available skulls. The last 2 times that I played, I flipped literally every single tile that there was to flip in the game. And by turn 17 out of 20, I'd done everything that was possible to do. And I'd scored 357 points. There was nothing left for me to do, and I hadn't even reached the end of the game.
And now, I haven't gotten that far, so you obviously figured out some things that I haven't.
You have to chain cards together. So the top of cards will often have something that says play a card for free, and that doesn't cost anything to play. On either the multiplayer game or the solo game, you can just play a card for free, and that allows you to have incredible efficiency, which is very important in the multiplayer game because hibernating is ostensibly bad because you're losing efficiency and it's a race game. And in the solo game, it's bad because you're using one of your 20 actions, right? So it is incredibly powerful to be able to do that.
So when you play those cards for free, you don't actually use one of your actions.
Correct.
Oh, well, you see, I may have been playing some of the rules wrong to make it even harder for me in the solo version.
Yeah.
Which...
There's no competition in the solo. One criticism I have, my bigger criticism of the game is that it's too baggy not to have the gold card. It's too much of a sandbox. I was saying that the game's bones are they're just fine. I'll double down on that with the idea that they're not tight. It's a very baggy game, and the gold card becomes a necessary evil because it's so easy to just do things in the game. Whatever low-hanging fruit is in front of you, if there's an opportunity to flip an exploration tile and it's next to one of my outposts, I'm probably going to do it without the gold card because, okay, that gets me 4 points and, gets me a new card, right? It all gives points. Everything you do in the game gives points or resources and or abilities rather quickly, and the majority of the board is obscured, and the machine upgrades may change, so they're not really worth working towards, which means that, for the most part, the game would be no forward thinking at all. The forward thinking opportunities are very limited, aside from the 4 corner spots. You need the scorecard to tell you what's important in the game. It creates a strategy where otherwise there would only be a tactic, which is get the cheapest thing in front of you and use it. It also informs the tension between that easy tactical benefit and that difficult long-term strategy. And it makes the hard to achieve combinations worth doing, which they wouldn't be otherwise without those gold cards because you would have nothing to work towards. You would have no opportunity cost for doing the easy thing. You would only do the easy thing.
But in the multiplayer game, the race element of the game would prevent you from doing everything because somebody's just going to end the game before you can do it all. So yes, it is quite a loose game. Loose and tight we're defining as loose. You can feel like you can do whatever you want, and tight you're struggling to get things done. But I feel like the time cutoff of the game would still have you make difficult choices, no?
Maybe. I mean, in most of my games, people generally took the same number of Explorer actions, which are between 1 and 5 points, and they generally got 1 to 2 of the corner spaces. They weren't generally the differential who won the game or not. It was generally based off of the skulls, right? And the skulls really broke it up, and the skull endgame is, yes, that is what modifies it and what makes it worth doing. But again, those skulls are specifically tied to the endgame bonus card that I'm talking about.
Well, it would also be some variation in whether people got to the top of machine tracks or not, I would think, in the multiplayer game.
Again, in general, the big points have come from the skull card.
Interesting, because I didn't really feel that was the case in the solo game.
The skulls for me in the solo game, I've always got all 6 of them. It's never been an issue because there's no race to get them.
Yeah, I think in my solo games that was true all but one time, and the other time it was because one of my 3 goals was lame and didn't really fit with anything I wanted to be doing extensively.
Yeah.
Which, again, in terms of the balance of the game, some of the in-game scoring goals are just better to get than others, I think.
Based off of how the board is laid out, based off of like what resources are needed. I don't see somebody like deriving a delineation of this is the explicit path that I need to take. I need to flip this tile, this tile, this tile, and this tile, and I am forward planning throughout all of that. Here is exactly how I'm going to generate my resources and end at this explicit corner tile right now, and that will get me this many cards. This will be my endgame point. Like, it's not really possible to forward plan that much because people are going to interrupt your plans, or you're not going to have the resources, or you're not going to have the cards, right? Maybe, but I feel like it would almost be as much about like random chance as it would be about like forward planning. The forward planning for me has really come from the skull cards.
You know what this game reminds me of? You're not going to be able to relate because I don't think you played the game. It reminds me of Endless Winter in some ways. Not that all the mechanisms are the same, but it's also this cool theme, beautiful production, very interesting core mechanisms that feels maybe a bit too loose and a bit too easy to get things done. People love that game. So I think it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people love Revive. And I think I like this game, at least so far, more than perhaps my criticisms are letting on. I found the flow of the game really fun. Doing what you're doing and getting engrossed in the puzzle of getting that combo chain off, satisfying and fun. So I want to like this game, and I fear as I get into the multiplayer game that I'm going to encounter some of what you're talking about.
I like the game quite a bit. I don't think it's a great game, though. I think the bones are kind of basic. I think that it's elevated by the race element, and I think the dopamine hit of making card combos and achieving things before your other opponents can and outcompeting them as far as efficiencies feels fantastic. I don't think it necessarily lends itself to really clever plays, though. I think it allows for clever plays, but it's kind of the mechanisms doing the work for you, if that makes sense.
It does.
I will say the most clever thing that you can do is use your machines wisely and say, I'm going to interrupt my action right now and turn these 3 resources into 3 wild resources and 3 points. And that is going to get me across this threshold on the scoring track, which gets me this skull. And I'm also going to use this other machine that turns a crystal into a special player ability action, which gets me up on the research track. And I get to the point on the research track where I also grab a skull. And then my second ability, I'm going to use to place out this outpost. This outpost is going to accrue me 2 points of movement up the green track, which gets me up to the point where I get a skull from the green track. And I ended the game. And you guys both have 1 round to do what you need to do. I did everything that I needed to do to maximize my end game points. Those moments feel incredible. They feel extremely clever. The fact that you can do as much as you want with the machines is a wonderful feeling, but you really need that ceiling tension of the race in order to feel that cleverness and in order to even feel the necessity for it.
Well, I still had fun in the solo game. I want to dive into some of those campaign races and see how they work. Do you agree with me that some races just feel much stronger than others?
Yeah, I think Kunibar feel incredibly powerful. I feel like I forget what they're called, but they're a crow race, which allows you to basically get infinite explore distance. I feel like
and they get cheaper explorers.
Right. And
those felt like the most powerful to me.
They're very powerful. I think that the green race that you can use books as any other resource, effectively as a wild, and can generate a ton of books, feels very powerful.
But that 4th race feels kind of lame. The
Hofstadterens, who basically get to use water ability twice. Like, I don't really care. Like, I can get those abilities elsewhere and not have to spend a turn doing them. Or, the other race that basically gets cheaper placement. Okay, like, I don't really care. Okay, somebody doesn't want to take that spot and give me the resources for going there. Well, all right, fine. Like, they'll just go to another spot. Like, there's some races that they don't feel that effective because they require player interaction, or they interact with like not often used parts of the map or game.
One thing I should mention when I'm also talking about the balances, I didn't love how like the population part of the game, spreading your people, was dependent on turning tiles over. Now, again, if you're playing in a large multiplayer game, there may be tons of tiles turned over that have places you can put population. But in the solo game, if I was only turning over half the tiles, now you were turning over all the tiles. I had one game where I was trying to do that strategy, and I didn't turn over a single population spot in the game.
You know that you can see what's on the tile based off of what's on the back.
Really?
Yep. And we'll tell you whether it's a population tile. It will tell you whether it's a lake. We'll tell you whether it's a crystal. We'll tell you what's on there. Tony.
Okay then.
You got to play the game again. My scores
are going to be even higher the next time I play.
Oh, poor Tony. Go play the game again solo, do it right, and go play multiplayer.
But here's the thing. Coming back to this score thing, I feel like you can just mess it all up and still be in the utopia thing of the scoring. So it was kind of didn't incentivize me to me. How can I grind out some more points out of this? You know what I mean?
Correct. The solo game is, for a baggy game, the solo game is even baggier.
Do you agree with me that the production is very nice and it looks nice on the table?
Yeah, I think the production looks great. I think that there's lots of colors. I like the color of the cards matching the color of the resources, matching the color of the machine tracks. I think that's really elegant. I don't necessarily like the design of the machine tracks and how they're laid out, although I do like that it shoots for diversity. Like you have to go up the green and the gray track to get a skull on in between those tracks. And then you have to go up like the green and the yellow track in order to get the end game points on the green track. Like that's
I like
smart.
that, but
That's good design.
It looks confusing in terms of the tracks are sort of all intertwined with each other.
Yes.
And at first, your first game or two, you're like, okay, wait, what unlocks what machine spot here? And it's a little difficult to tell the first couple times you play. So that's a little bit beginner unfriendly.
Yeah, but the card slots are easy to use as far as like slotting things in and out. There's a space for everything. There's a space for all your researchers. There's a space for all of your houses. It takes up too much space on the table. Like you need a really big table to play. I was at a game on Monday and to turn people away because we simply didn't have enough room for a fourth player. So that's an issue.
And I believe it because I'm playing this solo and it's taking up my whole table. And it's a game I really want to love because, again, I really enjoy the core bones of this game, but I am worried that all the sort of baggy, balancy sort of issues that make the game a little too easy to accomplish what you want to accomplish may ultimately not have this be a game I want to play a million times. We'll see but I'm definitely enjoying myself enough. I'm going to get it played multiplayer and run into those race elements, and I'll come back to you with my updated thoughts at that point.
Okay, I'm looking forward to more thoughts on Revive.
Lost in the many mechanisms of Revive are the fact that it, like some other modern board games, uses reset turns where you have to give up the opportunity to perform actions to be able to reset your player board. In this case, clear out your card spots, reset your machines, and also get a bonus. And it creates an interesting trade-off with this mechanism about when you reset. Do you want to get more turns worth of action squeezed out, or do you want to get those things cleared away so you can start taking more powerful turns again soon?
Right. But unlike a game like Eclipse, where everybody has to pass and then it's determined to be the end of the round and then you reset, no, these games keep going. Take your reset turn, you revive your resources, and you come back at it right away. The thing is, the game will keep on moving on without you during that reset turn. So there's got to be some use cost to it.
That's the trade-off. I think it's worth saying before we dive into this a little bit, to give a larger context, you pointed to it. You could say in modern Euro games or a lot of modern board games, there's three ways these turns are done. One is with these reset turns. It's probably the least popular option. Then there's rounds, but they go till everybody's done and then everybody resets at once. You pointed out Eclipse. Clans of Caledonia or Terra Mystica, another good example of that round goes till everyone's done taking actions. And then the most common is the formal round structure, where everybody takes a round and at the end takes, your 4 worker placement actions in the round, and then at the end of the round there's a reset of everything that everybody does at the same time.
I'd say there's a fourth one, which is just nobody takes any breaks ever.
Yeah, that would be Scythe, right? Where it just keeps going and there's no reset turns per se.
Right.
The game isn't structured mechanically the way they're needed.
Right. A good version of a game with a reset turn will have some cost to it. Some counter to them to make you not want to do it. Try to eke out every single efficiency of what you can do before you take that reset turn. Either it'll have a race element and you'll be delaying your step towards that race element by one turn, or there will be a limited number of times that you can reset, in which case you'll have potentially reset too early and lost some efficiency as far as your revivifications, or there will be some sort of opportunity for the game to punish you during the reset turn as you are basically not ready for what's coming for you.
Yeah, I would say the most thought of game when we think of reset turns, or the most popular game when we think of reset turns, well, actually, Gloomhaven's probably the most popular, but when we actually think about reset turns, what comes to a lot of people's mind, I think, is Concordia. It's sort of the poster child for that. Bring all the cards back into your hand and get some money, but don't take any of the game's main actions this round, right? Because every action is playing a card, and then the reset turn is picking up your cards. And it kind of makes the choice very clear to you, right? Because you want to take these actions. On the other hand, if you want to repeat certain actions over and over again for a certain reason, because you're good at them or because it's what you really need to be doing, then you may have to take reset turns more often to get the cards that give you what you want to do back in your hand, as opposed to playing other actions that aren't your top priority right now. So that trade-off is super clear in Concordia. I think that's one of the things that's really cool about it is it's the diminishing pool of options, and you also get more money when you take your reset turn if you've used all your cards. If you do it quickly, then you'll also get less out of your reset turn as well. So I think it works really well in that game. It's also not a long, complicated decision. The reset turn is fast. You just grab your cards and get some money, one for each card that you pick up, and you're good to go.
And what are you losing out on by resetting in Concordia?
Well, and you get some money, but you don't get to do the game's major action. Those spreading on the map and getting more cards are the things you really want to be doing in Concordia, and you're just not doing it while you're taking a reset turn, right? It may be also buying or trading resources, right, to be able to spread on the map, right? And you can't do those things when you're taking your reset turn. And maybe you need to really focus on buying cards at this point, and you want to take that reset turn early so you can get your 2 card buying cards back before you've played through your whole deck. That's where the trade-offs happen. And I think it's very straightforward. It's very clear. Everyone understands the trade-offs. It moves smoothly, and I think it's sort of the classic example of this mechanism.
Yeah, I think Revive has a very similar notion. I think it's even clearer, actually. You're not necessarily getting anything by reviving, by resetting. You do get a movement up the hibernation track, and then what you end up getting out of it is you get to reset all of your cards and put them into the discard. You get all of your cards that are in the discard back that were already in the discard. You get all of them back. And then you also get all of your machine energy back, and you get to use all of your machines again. And what's wonderful is at the beginning of these reset turns, you are the most powerful that you'll ever be. And not only are you the most powerful that you'll ever be, you've also accumulated a bunch of bonuses in that game that you have already utilized the round previous. And so this is the most, every time that you've reset, you've become more expansive as far as your dominance and as far as your power. So there's a huge power gradient there that it feels wonderful to start off and be able to do pretty much anything that you want. You can enact pretty much any strategy any sequencing that you want as far as your machines and as far as your card play in that moment.
Yeah, it really gives this feeling of putting the tempo of the game in your hands. If you reset more often and revive, you hibernate more often, you'll feel like you have fewer but more powerful turns, is what it'll feel like.
The issue, I played a couple of games of Revive where people have wanted to reset right before I've taken the skulls, and they haven't done so. And so I've taken the final skulls and triggered the end game, and they basically, with their last turn, are left with, well, kind of a crappy turn because they didn't hibernate the round before. And that's the issue with the hibernation. You're delaying yourself to the race end game.
Yeah, it's almost as if you think the game's about to end, in the one hand, you might want to squeeze out those extra turns, but only if you have a lot of resources. If you don't, you should just hibernate so you can activate all your machines and get a last uber turn in at the end.
Anno 1800 is the same thing. I don't think it does it radically different. Basically, you get all of your workers back, and you can utilize those workers again. In the case of Revive, you're trying to get skulls. In the case of Anno 1800, you're trying to get rid of all of your worker cards, and so you've delayed that efficiency to some extent. So you don't want to take too many of those, and there's a counteraction to that, which is using gold to reuse your workers. So some games include a mechanism where you effectively are able to step around the hibernation, step around the resetting for even longer.
Yeah, and not every action in Anno requires the workers, right? So you can do other things maybe and not have to reset right away. Or you can have a strategy where you try to get tons of workers and then you don't have to reset as often. So different strategies play into that.
Right, but of course, if you're doing that, the game smartly includes more worker cards that you have to deal with in order to balance out that strategy. So yes, you're being more efficient, you can last your turns longer, but you have more cards to deal with before you can strike into the end game.
One game that I think does something unique with this reset action is a game we talked about last year, Space Station Phoenix. And that's a reset for income, which feels a little bit like Concordia and money that you need. But as you put people on your space station, you actually upgrade what you get when you take income, when you take your reset turn. So your reset turn is you kind of hate it because all you do is get a little bit of money that you desperately need early on. But later on, you get a bunch of points. You get some of the things you get from normal actions. Later on, you're like, I think I don't have much to do with my regular turn. I'll just take a resource turn, not because I need money, but because I get all these other bells and whistles, right? So upgrading the value of your reset turn is something kind of cool that game does by leaning into that mechanism.
Yeah, that's a smart take on it. I like that. A tangent away from that is Everdell, which this only has so many reset turns that it can take. Each one is tied to a season, so you have a spring, summer, and fall reset. The issue being, if you only take a few actions during your spring turn and then you reset, yes, you'll have the ability to reutilize those actions and to have more resources. However, the reality is that you are not very powerful going into the next season. And that will cascade, and you'll have a shorter summer season, which means you will also have a shorter fall season. And I have seen games of this where an individual has reset, 3 times within the first half hour, and the other player has spent another 20 minutes going on because they've done a better job of building out their tableau and ensuring that their tableau can live past the reset turns. The reset turns really are the game limiter as far as the end game of Everdell.
Yeah, not to take away from Everdell as a whole game, I never felt like those decisions were as sort of balancing one way or the other in those games. It was more like it was just kind of an indicator. If you were resetting too soon, you were probably in trouble because you just weren't getting as many actions as the other players.
Right. And generally, efficiency from that game only came from cards that let you throw out pre-existing cards for resources, or from the green growth cards, and whether you could effectively utilize those to prolong your first season.
Exactly. It's like if you can do certain card combos, card and resource combos, you can prolong having to reset, which is kind of always what you want to do.
Right.
Architects of the West Kingdom is one I like to talk about because it's got a very unique reset turn. It's not even really called a reset turn, but you can spend an action basically going to the jail and getting all your workers which have been put in jail, or getting all your workers which have piled up at one of the worker placement spots. So it's like worker placement, but you have a ton of workers and they just kind of pile up until you take turns to do fairly thematic things to actually get them back for you. It's like Space Station Phoenix in that every reset turn isn't the same. It's like, are you getting people from jail? Are you getting them from somebody else's board where they've basically been kidnapped? Are you getting them from worker placement spots? How many workers do you have at that worker placement location so you can get them from different places? So there's different ways to play with the reset turn there, and different amount of workers you're going to get back, and different things you can also do at that worker placement spot that aren't even getting workers back, right? That you can mix in with those. And because you can get specialists to make certain actions more strong, maybe you've got an engine where you accomplish all these other things when you grab workers back as well.
Yep. Another really unique version of the reset turn is in Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, where you actually have a choice of how you want to use your reset turn. You can take a short rest, which allows you to get right back into the action right away. Of course, it ties to that thing that we see in Everdell where you lose a card, so realistically you only have a certain number of reset actions. But also you could instead choose to long rest, in which case you take your entire turn and go last in the initiative order. But you also get to reset several of your items, and you also get to health back, which means
you get to choose which card you lose. Yep.
Right. But in order to do that, you might open yourself up to attack. So it's very important that you reset at the right time in the right way. You're only going to realistically be able to do that long rest if you're in a safe place.
And then there's these choices about what do you want to do that reset, that rest early to get that key card back and use it again right now, as opposed to if I wait one more turn, then I'll have another prolonged turn, and turns are essentially your life in this game. Another turn before you have to lose a card, but then I'm taking kind of a mediocre action on this turn with my last 2 cards. Maybe I should just rest now and get my better cards back.
Yep. So I like the concept of reset turns because it gives you another option to basically enter God mode as soon as you take a reset. And it's a constant tension with how long can I make this last, and a constant gauge of how efficient am I really being with this, prolonging this, how many more resources or actions am I really eking out. For example, I had plenty of times when I was playing Revive and I thought, okay, well, I could use this little slot action for one resource, or I could just hibernate right now, and on my next action, I'll be able to do a million things, right? So there's a constant tension of, do I really want to take, another mediocre, small reward for what I'm putting into it type of action, or do I want to reset so that my turn after that is extremely powerful?
These reset turns give games less predictability and more dynamism. And when you're playing that 6-round worker placement game, it's like, okay, we're all going to go around, we're all going to place our workers. Okay, those 3 worker placement spots are the only ones left, so I'm going to choose one of them, and then we're all going to take our stuff back and we're all going to reset this. It's, on the one hand, it gives us sort of a comforting, familiar warmth to it, in that round structure we're used to. But on the other hand, it kind of pigeonholes everyone into feeling a little bit similar in what they're doing, and doesn't give strategic options at the end of turns. The end of rounds in the round structure games kind of feel like they're a bit rote, as you're in a, maybe you have few actions to choose from, and yes, now I've just got to reset everything. Like you said, they give you additional choices, allow you to sort of set your own strategy and your own tempo of how you want to play the game. We'd love to hear from you guys on this. This is one where I'd love to hear from the Discord, because it's not a commonly talked about mechanism. It's not a sexy mechanism compared to some of the other ones. It's more like in the background. So we'd like to hear about your favorite games that use reset turns, and where that reset turn is really an interesting decision point for you. I'm sure there's a lot of other games that we haven't talked about.
Yep. You can find our Discord in the show notes. Check us out at TwoWoodForAWheat.com. If you have any comments, suggestions, or concerns, you can reach out to us at TwoWoodForAWheat@gmail.com. Check out Tony's blog. He's at Max Longstreet, The Secrets of Great Games on Board Game Geek. And in 2 weeks, I believe we are reviewing Sabika, or if I finally get your mail package out and you get your plays, and maybe Legacy of You.
We shall see. In the meantime, again, find us on the Discord, and we'll see you soon, folks.
See you. Stay frosty. Two Wood for a Wheat is recorded across the airwaves in Bear Creek, Pennsylvania, and Chicago, Illinois. We're produced by Tony Faber and edited by Patrick Flannery. Follow us on Instagram at TWFAW and find more episodes and blog posts at TwoWoodForAWheat.com.
If I seemed anxious with the time earlier, Pat, it was because I'm really eager to mow the lawn before I go to my minor league baseball game.
Wow, you are so suburban. It's incredible.
Like suburban duo. William, who's had eye issues because he keeps walking into things with his eye, and he's on 7 different medicines, which have to be given a total of 18 times a day.
Oh my God. You're a full-time dog nurse?
Basically, exactly. I mean, he's just got a really bad eye infection, and it can be treated, but you need all this. It's everything from 4 different types of antibiotics to blood serum that you put in his eyes. And this is not just an eye infection. She's got the big sty, like the pink eye, but it's combined with this corneal scratch.
Do they make little doggy eye patches?
I want to get him like a visor or something.
Yeah, he needs a little bookie visor, one of those green caps. And then he can do your accounting too.
I'm awake. I have some Major Dickinson's dark roast in me.
What is it? Dickinson's?
Major Dickinson's.
That sounds like a made-up joke name.
No, it's Pete's coffee brand, and it's actually quite well liked.
Dickinson's?
Dickinson's. Dick A-S-O-N. Dickinson's. This is not filthy. This is very popular coffee brand. Major Dickinson's.
I bet it's popular. Amongst a certain demographic, I'm sure it's very popular.
No, try it yourself.
I tried that once in college, discovered that wasn't really for me.
Okay.
In 2020, during the summer, we had a series of radical events in the city, not the least of which was an individual known as the Urban Cowboy, who owned a horse and rode around on the streets of Chicago and could be found riding his horse down the highway at full speed, full sprint, racing next to these cars on the interstate. Now, he was later arrested and charged with animal cruelty because the poor horse's horseshoes had come off as he was running on this asphalt. But for a moment, him galloping along, holding an American flag, it was quite a sight to see.